So can you believe that the Curado BFS has been out for 2 years already? And despite this reel having not just one, but 2 price increases, it seems to be selling very well, as it's routinely sold out in a lot of places and it's regularly on Tackle Warehouse's bestsellers page. So that tells me that bait finesse here in America is not just a fad that's going to come and go. It seems like it's here to stay, and there are other companies getting in on the popularity of bait finesse, like LEWS coming out with their custom light SS, and of course KASTKING offering 2 bait finesse reels in the Zephyr and the Kestrel Elite. So with the increasing popularity of bait finesse, I'm pretty sure a lot of the Daiwa only or Daiwa Tatula fans are thinking in their heads, where is the bait finesse reel for us from Daiwa? Where is the Tatula Air? Well, today I'm gonna make one for you, since apparently Daiwa won't. So a few years ago I came out with a video called The Beginner's Guide to Bait Finesse, and in that video I stated that probably the second cheapest way to get into bait finesse is to see if there is an aftermarket BFS spool made for a reel that you already own. And luckily for the Daiwa Tatula, there are a ton of BFS spool options on AliExpress, and the one I decided on is this one. This is the Chameleon DIY, which stands for Do It Yourself, T34. Now I'll explain why I chose this particular spool over all the other Tatula BFS spools on AliExpress after I take it out of the canister. But this spool is going to be the basis of this video. Now I will say that I've been sitting on this spool for quite a long time now, and I went on AliExpress before I started recording this video to see exactly when I ordered it, and it said September 7 of 2020. So it's been like 2.5 years of this spool just sitting around waiting for this video to finally be made. So if this spool is broken or something's wrong with it, if there's some kind of a defect, since it's been so long, I'm just gonna be shit out of luck. But let us begin. Okay, so let's go ahead and pop this open, and boom, check that out. Oh yeah, I chose pink. And look at just how ported out this spool is. Look at that. It's keeping a long spool shaft that I'm assuming is made of aluminum, even though it's really shining like it's steel, but it might be steel. Alright, there we go. Now real quick, let's just go over the reasons why I picked this spool over all the others. Now the first reason is that after doing my research, this spool appears to be the lightest available for the Tatula, and we're gonna weigh it here in a moment. But the second reason is that this spool, as you can see, is sporting a moving rotor inductor, so it's keeping Daiwa's dynamic magnetic brake system, and appears to be mimicking the air brake twisting rotor that's found in Daiwa's official Air BFS reels. And the third reason was that this appears to be one of the cheapest, and even today it can be picked up for like under $35, which is insane. Now if you go on AliExpress and you're shopping around for a Tatula spool, there are a lot of them out there that are heavier, but also they're gonna have fixed inductors. Let me show you an example. Now here is a RORO spool that I bought for my STEEZ SV, and while it is very lightweight, it's got a fixed inductor, which I don't like. If I'm gonna make a homemade Tatula Air, I wanna keep as much of Daiwa's technology as possible. So be wary of that when you're shopping around for a BFS spool for your Tatula on AliExpress. A lot of them will have fixed rotors. So now it's time to grab my spool scale and see just how light this spool is. Okay, so the spool scale's out, and I also brought out a couple of other spools to do a comparison. And let's see what's up. Now, this is the spool of the Curado BFS. It comes in at 8.8 grams. So by today's standards, that's extremely heavy, but that doesn't keep the Curado BFS from being an extremely potent bait finesse reel. But the next spool we're going to weigh is going to be the spool of the 2020 Alphas Air. And currently, until the new SS Air comes out, I believe this is the lightest bait finesse spool that Daiwa makes. And it comes in at 6.19 grams. And you can see it is extremely small, but the size and its lightweight allows this spool to easily cast 1 gram. Alright, so let's see if this chameleon spool is as light as they say on AliExpress. Boom! It is right on the money at 6.13 grams. The picture on AliExpress says like 6.14. So, despite being massively bigger in diameter, as you can see, the chameleon spool is actually just as light as the much smaller Alphas Air spool. Now, does that mean it's going to perform just as good as the Alphas Air when it comes to the light baits? Now, that remains to be seen, because Daiwa has shown us that decreasing the spool diameter is just as important as decreasing the spool weight when it comes to throwing the really light stuff. I'm talking 1.5 grams and under. So with this T34, you actually get a spool that's just as light as Daiwa's official air spools that they put in their STEEZ and Alphas. So real quick, before we get out on the water to test this spool, I'm going to go over a list of all the reels that these chameleon spools will fit into. Now we're going to start off with the T34, obviously, which is the one that I have. And there's also a T33 and a T32. Now the T34 will fit into the original Tatula CT, the gray and red one, the Tatula CT Type R, that black and red reel, and it will also fit into the smaller Tatula 100. And since it fits the Tatula 100, it's also going to work in the Tatula Elite Longcast, as well as the Tatula Elite Pitch and Flip. And I'm pretty sure it's going to work with the Tatula Coastal, the blue one. Now, I'm not talking about the latest Coastal 80, I'm talking about the one that's been out for a couple of years, the inshore saltwater reel. And this spool is also going to work in the FUEGO CT. So for all you FUEGO owners out there who may be watching, this spool will work for you guys as well. Now, this spool is not going to work with the first generation Tatula SV, the one that uses the CT frame. What you're going to want is the T33 model, and that's because the original Tatula SV has a 33mm spool, while this one is 34mm. And this spool is not going to work in the latest Tatula SV, the 2020 model, that uses the same frame as the 100. If you want a spool for that reel, you're going to need the T32. Now, I actually have a lot of those reels that I just listed off. So which reel are we going to convert into a homemade Air BFS reel? Now, the logical choice, since it's the lightest and has probably the smallest frame, would be my Tatula Elite Longcast. But no, we're not going to use that reel. Now, the cheapest choice would be the FUEGO CT, which I have, but no, we're not going to use that reel either. The reel that we're going to convert into a Tatula Air is going to be this reel right here. The, I guess, quote-unquote updated Tatula CT, which I think was updated a couple of years ago. And the reason I'm picking this reel to use is because it's the cheapest Tatula available, and I'm pretty sure it's still Daiwa's best-selling baitcaster. So that means there are plenty of these out there, and yeah, let's see if this spool will fit in with no problems. All right, and here's the stock spool. Very deep and very heavy. We're talking like 17 grams. All right, let's slide this chameleon spool in. And we'll just do a little, I guess, home test to see if we think that the brakes are going to be too weak or too strong. All right, there we go, blue and pink. Okay, so it spins pretty smooth. I don't hear any noises or any kind of rubbing. Let me check the spool tension. There's a little bit of side-to-side play, and I'm gonna tighten it up a little bit. Okay, so there's just a hair of side-to-side play, exactly how Daiwa would want you to set up one of their reels that have the air brake. And let's turn the mag force to the maximum position of 20. Let's do a little free spool test. All right, so barely a second of free spool with the brakes jacked up. So that's promising. Okay, so let's turn the brakes all the way down and see if it spins any longer. Okay, so I'm talking barely 2 seconds of free spool with the brakes turned up, so I have a feeling that these brakes will be just fine. So I'll see you out on the water. Alright, so I made it out on the water to test out the homemade do-it-yourself Tatula Air with the Chameleon T34 spool. Now the main focus on this test is going to be to, one, see if the brakes work properly, if there's enough braking power, and two, I'm going to be testing the lower limits of bait finesse. I'm talking 1/8 of an ounce and under, and I've pre-selected 3 baits already. That weigh 3.5 grams, which is 1/8 of an ounce, all the way down to 1.5 grams, which is under 1/16 of an ounce. Now I'm not really worried about the upper end bait finesse because those weights are easy to cast, but since we're concentrating on the low end, I've mounted the Tatula on the Ace Hawk AG Venom, the 5'6" ultralight model, and I've spooled the reel up with exactly 100 feet of 4-pound copolymer. And hopefully you guys can see that 100 feet of 4-pound copolymer barely scratches the surface of how much line this spool can hold. So this spool has plenty of line capacity if you wanted to use heavier line. So let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start off with the heaviest lure first, which is a 1/8 ounce little minnow, and we're going to set this reel up to have just a little bit, a hair of side-to-side play in the spool tension. Since this reel is copying Daiwa's air brake, okay, that should be good. So with 0 on the mag force dial, the fall on this lure is pretty fast, and we're going to crank this brake dial all the way up to 20. And we're starting off with this high brake setting because hopefully you guys can see on the water that it is really, really windy and it's changing directions like a lot. So let's start casting. All right, so the spool, not the quietest, made a buzzing noise, but hopefully you guys saw. Very, very good spool control. I could probably even cast thumb free. Yeah. And I can actually hear the little pop pop of the air brake after the spool stops. So yeah, they've copied the air brake pretty good. All right, let's start backing these brakes down, and I'm gonna off camera back them down as low as they'll go, and then I'll show you what this spool can do. Okay guys, so the lowest brake setting I could go is number 8. And let me show you what this Chameleon spool can do. All right, hopefully you guys saw where that landed. This spool is very loud. It's very buzzy during the cast. And we're probably getting about 25 yards. Consistently. Now there are some loops of overrun when I cast on the number 8 brake setting, at least overhead. But it works itself out, and I will say that I did have a huge blow up off camera. Ooh, I just had a blow up there. I had a huge blow up off camera that took me like 5 minutes to pick out. It's way worse than this one, but I'm happy to say that the line did not get caught up between the spool and the frame, so the tolerance between the spool and the frame seems to be okay. Now this isn't the best casting lure, because in my opinion, you know, a 1/8 ounce lure should be getting at least 85, close to 90 feet, especially with the spool this light. So I'm going to turn the brakes up 1 click to 9. Let's see if that solves that overrun. Yep, sure does. So we have a ton of brake in reserve. With the brakes being on 9, we have, you know, half the mag force dial if we needed more brake power. But looks like we are getting about 25 yards. Now with a different 1/8 ounce lure, something that flies through the air a little bit better, I'm sure we can get maybe about another 5 feet. And I just saw a carp surface out there. But with that being said, let's switch up to an even lighter lure. Okay, so next up we have switched to a lure that is over 1 gram lighter in the Lucky Craft Pointed 48, which is one of my favorite trout lures. And let's crank the brakes up to 12 and see what this chameleon spool can do. Now, I do feel a wind coming into me, but let's see how we can handle that. All right, handled it pretty good. Distance on that cast was about, had a little sunfish chasing, but it was about, I don't know, 40 feet tops. So let's go down on the brakes. 2 clicks to number 12. I'm sorry, number 10. Okay, we got more wind. So the spool is light enough so that the lures don't go off to the left when I'm casting. In fact, they kind of go off to the right, but the distance is not really that impressive, and it's probably due to the air brake, and maybe these bearings ain't that great. But we're going to go down 2 more clicks to 8, which is the lowest setting I could go with the 1/8 ounce lure, and let's see what happens. All right, so we're probably getting about 25 yards, so about equaling the distance of the bigger jerkbait. Let's cast this way. And I'm going to go down 1 more click on the brakes because there is not an overrun to be seen when casting this Pointer 48. All right, so with the brake set to 7, we had a couple of loops of overrun that worked itself out, but I think it added about another good 5 foot to the cast. So that's actually completely acceptable in my opinion for a lure this light, which is 2.2 or 2.3 grams on the scale, so about 3/32 of an ounce. So for all you guys who may want to use your Tatula for trout fishing or pan fishing, or just casting a lure this light for whatever, this spool can do it easily. All right, we'll do a few more casts. Yeah, that's about 75 foot, which is more than respectable for casting a lure this light. Ooh, had a blow up there. So at this point, if you're not comfortable with having that kind of an overrun, you know, you can just click the mag force dial up one click and it should solve that with no problem. Now, as far as this Tatula CT, how does it feel as a converted vape finesse reel? Now, I can still feel the mag force dial when jerking this little minnow back in, because I work my jerk base like this, and the overall size of the reel when you're coming from, you know, these super tiny BFS reels is noticeable, but it's not uncomfortable. Now, even though this is supposed to be the compact Tatula when it came out, by today's standards, it's actually very big, but if it was my only option, it'll do just fine as a converted vape finesse reel. All right, let's throw the final and lightest lure. GoPro, stop recording. So here's the lightest lure we're going to test, which is this little stonefly imitation with a trout slayer jig head. It weighs about 1.5 grams. And this setup is killer for big bluegill. Now, the plan was to eventually use this lure to target some bluegill for this video, but it's been weird this year. It's the last week of April, and we should be smack dab in the middle of the bass spawn. So there should be bedding bass or other bass roaming around. There should be a ton of panfish roaming around as well, looking to eat the bass eggs, of course. And I don't see anything other than, you know, some carp activity out there and maybe like a bluegill chaser. And that's probably because it was like 80 degrees all last week, and then all of a sudden overnight, the temperature dropped 20 degrees. So I'm assuming that the spawn is probably going to be delayed for a week or two, and I think it was like that last year. But anyway, let's finish this test up, and we're going to set the brakes to, let's go to 10. So we went from 3.5 grams to 2.3 grams, now to 1.5 grams. So this lure is less than half as much as the original lure we started out with. And let's see what this chameleon spool can do. And it can do it very, very well. It casted it straight and accurate right where I was aiming. Distance was probably about 35 feet, I would say. And let's go down 2 clicks and we'll find the limit of what this spool can do with this light lure. Okay, wow, so we gained about a good 5 foot, I would say, and still no issues with the spool and no fish. I know there's fish in here, but maybe this cold weather has just got them not wanting to eat. But when it comes to distance and accuracy and ease of casting, it seems like these chameleon spools are really made for the really, really light lures, which should be no surprise considering it's copying Daiwa's air brake, which handles the light lures really, really good. But when it comes to long casting, the heavier BFS lures, they struggle. I feel I can go down even lower on the brakes, which I'm gonna do, but man, that was a good, I would say at least 50 feet on that cast. All right, let's go down to 7 on the brakes. Okay, I think 7 is the limit. I saw some loops there. I'm gonna crank it back up to 8. But it's handling 1.5 grams with 4-pound line like it was nothing. I would love to cast just one little panfish. Let's cast over this way. Oh, I thought I had something. I think it was a snag. Well, something is feeding right there. Oh. Oh, this has got to be the biggest green sunfish yet. Let's see if we can yank him up here. Damn, that is a chunk. That might be the biggest green sunfish I ever caught. So this spool is properly broken in. Let's let him go. So I hope you guys like the word air, because I'm going to be saying it quite a few times in the next few weeks. And that's because the new Daiwa SS Air should be coming out next month in May. And of course I'm going to be getting one. But then this reel came in the mail today. And I'm going to be doing an unboxing of this reel probably next. But yeah, the word air is going to be thrown around quite a bit in the next few weeks. So with that being said, it's time to wrap up our little, I guess, review of the Chameleon spool for our homemade Tatula Air. And if Chameleon's goal was to make this spool perform just like all the other Daiwa Air BFS reels, then they hit it right on the head, because not only does it have the air brake popping noises, but just like the other Daiwa Air BFS reels, when it comes to long distance casting heavier lures, they're kind of mediocre. But when it comes to casting the really light ultralight lures, like this one right here, they excel. And that's exactly what this Chameleon spool does. It seems to really excel at casting the lighter stuff, but then when it comes to the upper end bait finesse, it's gonna probably fall behind most other reels. Now the only drawback to this spool was the fact that it's not a very quiet, smooth, or refined caster. Hopefully you guys heard when I was casting out there that it was actually quite loud. But other than that, it was great. So yeah, if you want to turn one of your Daiwa Tatulas or your Fuego CT into a trout or panfish slaying machine, then this is going to be a great spool to do that. Now I'm going to leave a link in the description on where you can buy this spool. And I think they're kind of sold out at the moment, but I'm pretty sure they're going to come back in stock. But at 35 bucks, this is probably the best upgrade you can make to your Tatula. Alright guys, thanks a lot.